If life is so brief, so fragile, so unpredictable, then why live at all? Why build, why love, why try, knowing it could all disappear tomorrow? That question doesn't always come during a tragedy. Sometimes it rises on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. When the dishes are done, the house is silent, and you suddenly feel hollow. It's not depression, it's not confusion, it's something deeper. A soft, echoing sense that all our doing might be missing the point. I used to brush it aside, go for a walk, make a to-do list, open Netflix. But the more I avoided it, the more it returned, until I stopped resisting. Until I sat with it. And when I finally did, something shifted. You see, in Buddhist philosophy, this question is not seen as a breakdown, it's seen as a breakthrough. The moment you stop running on autopilot, the moment you stop living like life is just a checklist, is the moment the soul begins to stir. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, successful or lost. If you've asked, what's the point of all this? Then something inside you is waking up, and that awakening is not a crisis. It's a calling, not to escape life, but to see it. To meet it, to live it, fully, honestly, fearlessly, while you still can. Because maybe, just maybe, the point of life isn't to find meaning. Maybe the point is to become awake enough to ask the question. And that right there might change everything. Part 1, the question doesn't need an answer, just awareness. We've been trained to chase answers, but what if the power lies in the asking itself? Most people think that the question, what's the meaning of life, demands a solid answer. They want it to land like a final verdict, something you can write in a journal, hang on a wall, or explain at a dinner party. But here's what no one tells you. The question is often more important than the answer. Years ago, I thought I needed to solve life. I devoured books, sat in lectures, watched videos. I was looking for the secret formula, the one idea that would finally make it all make sense. But every answer I found felt shallow, temporary, like a band-aid over something ancient. One afternoon, I was watching the sun sink through the blinds, and this question came again. Not with panic, but with presence. Not as a problem, but as a doorway. And in that moment, I stopped trying to answer it. I just listened. In Buddhism, that's the moment when something in your mind begins to shift. When surface-level slogans like "just be happy" or "chase your dreams" no longer satisfy. You're not being dramatic, you're not broken, you're waking up to something deeper, something real. This is not a crisis of meaning. It's a sign of ripeness, a signal that your consciousness is maturing, that you've outgrown the shiny distractions. Imagine a seed underground. It doesn't shout, "What's my purpose?" It just feels the pressure to break, to reach toward the light. That's what this question is doing inside you. It's pressing gently but firmly for you to grow. So instead of rushing to answer, try honoring the space it opens. Not with logic, not with certainty, but with curiosity, with humility. Because the moment you stop demanding a clean answer and start being present with the question, your entire relationship to life begins to change. It's no longer about solving life. It's about experiencing it with awareness. And that awareness, it's the very thing that makes you human. In fact, according to one old Buddhist parable, the odds of being born as a human, a being capable of asking questions like this, are as rare as a blind turtle surfacing once every 100 years, and placing its head through a floating wooden ring. That's not meant to scare you. It's meant to remind you this question isn't a weight, it's a gift. And you've been given the mind and the moment to carry it well. So before we try to fix or flee anything, let's pause here. Let's sit with the beauty of the question. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when we stop asking and start chasing, and why that chase leaves us more empty than fulfilled. Part 2, chasing happiness, fleeing from pain and staying stuck. It's not pain that traps us. It's the way we run from it. Let's be honest. We spend most of our lives trying to rearrange the furniture of our emotions. We chase the highs, dodge the lows, cling to what feels good and try to numb what doesn't. We think if we can just get the pieces lined up right, money, love, respect, health, then peace will finally arrive. But even when we get what we want, it slips away, and the chase begins again. This cycle is exhausting, and yet we keep repeating it. When I was younger, I thought happiness was a destination. If I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, fixed myself perfectly enough, I'd arrive. But every achievement, every high, no matter how sweet, came with a shadow, the fear of losing it, the pressure to sustain it. the itch for more. It's like chasing sunlight in the water. The harder you reach, the more it breaks apart. In Buddhism, this cycle is called dukkha. It's often translated as suffering, but it's more subtle than that. It's the background hum of dissatisfaction, even when things seem okay. It's the gnawing sense that something's missing, even in moments of joy. You know that feeling, you finally get the promotion, the new house, the relationship. And then within weeks, a new craving creeps in, a new insecurity, a new fear. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. You're running fast but going nowhere, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or struggling. The pattern is the same. Clinging, resisting, repeating. What the Buddha saw so clearly is this: the more we grasp at happiness, the more anxious we become. The more we avoid sorrow, the more it controls us. This doesn't mean we shouldn't feel joy or want better things. It means we need to see how our relationship to those desires determines our peace. Because both chasing and fleeing come from the same misunderstanding. That life is supposed to be under control, that we can force permanence onto impermanent things, but everything we love will change. Everything we fear will shift, and peace does not come from holding on, it comes from letting go. I remember a moment of stillness once during a simple walk at dusk. There was no big revelation, just the absence of running. And in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Enough. You don't have to destroy your desires. Just stop letting them drive the car, because when you finally stop running, and simply see the cycle for what it is, something begins to soften, and in that softening, space appears. Next, we'll explore what happens after all this chasing, when even death starts to look like an escape. But is it? Or is it just another ripple in the lake? Part 3, the ripple of our actions, why death isn't an escape. When life feels too heavy, we don't always wish for answers. Sometimes we just wish for it all to end. Maybe you've whispered this thought before, not out loud, maybe not even clearly to yourself. But in a quiet moment of exhaustion, you've wondered, wouldn't it be easier if I just didn't have to keep trying? In a world full of striving and sorrow, death can start to look like a reset button. A final silence after so much noise, a clean slate. But in Buddhist thought, death isn't the escape most people imagine. It's not a full stop. It's a continuation, not of your name, your memories, or your resume, but of your energy, your choices, your patterns. Every thought, every word, every action, intentional or not, sends out a ripple, like a stone dropped in a still lake. And those ripples, they don't stop when your body does. This is what the Buddha called kamma, often translated as karma. But forget everything pop culture has told you about it. Kamma isn't punishment. It isn't divine justice. It's cause and effect. It's the natural echo of your intentions. Speak with cruelty often enough and your mind becomes sharp and bitter. Act with compassion and your heart softens, not because someone is judging you, but because that's what you're practicing. And just like a trail of footsteps, your mind walks the path it's laid for itself. So when the body ends, the momentum doesn't vanish. It continues, not as you, exactly, but as the echo of what you cultivated. Think of lighting one candle from another. The flame carries forward, but it's not the same flame. Not a copy, not a clone, but a continuation. This is how Buddhism views rebirth, not as someone coming back, but as the process of becoming continuing to unfold. And when you look at it this way, something profound clicks. Death isn't freedom if life is still misunderstood. If we've lived chasing shadows, consumed by craving, running from pain, then what carries forward is confusion, not peace. But here's the power in that. If our actions ripple forward, then every single moment matters. Every word, every habit, every silent choice. You don't need to believe in many lives to feel the truth of this. Just look at how one kind act can echo through someone's week, or how one angry outburst can stain a relationship for years. That's kamma in motion. That's the ripple right here, right now. So death, in the end, is not the final escape. It's a mirror, and it reflects how we've lived, not how we've died, which is why the Buddha didn't teach people to fear death, but to understand life, to live in such a way that when the ripples finally settle, there is no fear left to carry, only clarity. In the next part, we'll explore how we can live like that, not by escaping extremes, but by walking the quiet, steady road in between. Part 4, the middle path, walking through life, not around it. We try so hard to fix life. But what if peace doesn't come from fixing, only from seeing clearly? We spend years trying to control everything. The outcome of our efforts, the people around us, even our own emotions. We plan, hustle, protect, avoid, all in hopes of keeping life smooth. But no matter how tightly we hold the wheel, life still swerves. Joy fades, sorrow visits, health shifts, people change. And somewhere along the way, we start asking, is there another way to move through all this? That's when the Buddha pointed to something radical in its simplicity, the middle path, not the path of indulgence, not the path of denial, but the steady road between the extremes. It's not flashy. It doesn't promise instant joy. It doesn't demand that you renounce the world or suppress your feelings. Instead, it invites you to live with balance, with eyes open and heart steady. I used to think the spiritual path had to be dramatic, leaving it all behind, meditating in silence for days, purging every desire. But real practice begins right here, in how you speak to your partner when you're tired, in how you breathe through stress instead of reacting, in how you notice a craving but don't let it own you. The middle path doesn't remove you from life. It roots you in life more deeply than ever. Imagine tuning a guitar string. Too tight and it snaps, too loose and it buzzes uselessly. But when it's just right, there's harmony. That's the middle path, just enough effort, just enough surrender. It asks, gently but honestly, are your habits rooted in fear or wisdom? Are you chasing comfort or cultivating understanding? And here's the quiet miracle. When you begin to live like this, not controlled by desire, not ruled by fear, you stop throwing more chaos into the world. You stop feeding the cycle. You start walking through life instead of around it. Whether you're a parent raising kids, a nurse in a busy hospital, a retiree planting tomatoes in your backyard, this path belongs to you, not because it gives you all the answers, but because it teaches you how to stay present with the questions. And when that becomes your rhythm, balance, awareness, compassion, life doesn't get easier, but it becomes lighter. Because you're no longer fighting it, you're flowing with it. In the next and final section, we'll return to where we began. What's the point of life, really? And maybe now we won't look for an answer, but for a presence that makes the question itself sacred. Part 5, the point is presence, living the answer in this moment. Maybe the point was never to find the answer, but to live like the question matters. After all the searching, all the detours, all the asking, we arrive back where we started. What's the point of life? But something feels different now. The urgency is gone. The pressure to solve it has softened. Because maybe life isn't a riddle to solve. Maybe it's a song to be heard, a cup to be tasted, a breath to be felt. In Buddhism, there's a word for mindful awareness, sati. But it means more than attention. It means remembrance, not just remembering to breathe or slow down, but remembering what matters. Remembering that this moment is not a step toward life. It is life. We think meaning will appear later, after success, after healing, after we figure it all out. But the truth. Meaning blooms when we show up fully and honestly to what's here now. I remember a moment not long ago. I was rinsing a dish after lunch. The sun hit the sink just right. The water was warm. And for no reason at all, I felt it, this deep, wordless sense of being home. Nothing profound had happened, and yet everything was alive. That's presence, not dramatic, not mystical, just real. It's how you listen to someone without thinking of your reply. It's how you notice the wind brushing your arm as you wait for a light to turn green. It's how you sit with grief, not to fix it, but to honor it. It's how you live like this moment is enough. Because here's the quiet truth. You don't have to conquer life. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to stop being absent from it. The Buddha didn't promise answers. He offered a way of seeing, a path that leads not to perfection but to presence. And when you walk that path, not tomorrow but now, life begins to glow from the inside, not because it's easy, but because you're finally in it. So if you're still wondering, what's the point? Maybe the point is that you're here, right now, awake, alive, asking, and that in itself is sacred.